everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into one of the biggest questions we all ask. What actually brings fulfillment in life? And we're going to explore it through the lens of a really old philosophical text that's all about this search for meaning. So, our journey starts with this absolutely knockout statement. It's from the author of Ecclesiastes, a guy we call the preacher. He looks out at the world, at everything going on, and this is his conclusion. And get this isn't just someone having a bad day. This is a profound sense of despair that really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack. You know, the preacher's despair really comes from a question that feels like it could have been written yesterday. When you look around, do you ever just get that feeling that things aren't quite right? That nagging sense that the world is somehow broken? Well, that feeling is the central problem this entire text is wrestling with. Okay, so to really get where the preacher is coming from, we have to try and see the world through his eyes. And for him, the one thing that defines life under the sun, as he calls it, is suffering. And it's everywhere. This right here is the heart of what he sees. It's not just that bad things happen. No, it's that he sees people being oppressed, and he sees that there is no one there to comfort them. It's this raw, unfiltered look at injustice that leads him to this dark thought that, hey, maybe the dead are actually better off than the living. And what's so wild is how modern this ancient observation feels. The preacher points out that a lot of the time, our hard work, our skills, all of it, it's just driven by envy of what our neighbor has. He calls out this comparative mindset, that constant rat race to one-up everyone else, and he says it's just pointless, a cycle of envy that never ends. But even with all this gloom, the preacher isn't totally without hope. He actually offers some really practical, very human advice for how to deal with such a tough world. He basically says, the harder life gets, the more you absolutely need to share it with good friends and allies. And he uses this brilliant image to make his point. Think about it. One person, alone, you might get knocked down by life's challenges. But two people, you can stand your ground. And three, well, a cord of 3 strands is incredibly tough to break. This is his first big piece of wisdom. There's real strength, real resilience when you're part of a community. All right, so for our next section, the preacher shifts his focus. He looks at all the things we chase to try and escape that suffering. Success, fame, money, and, well, his conclusion here is just as blunt. He gives this powerful example. Picture the most famous, most celebrated leader you can think of. Sure, their own generation might sing their praises. But what about the generation after that? Poof, they're forgotten. It's a perfect illustration of how fleeting worldly honor and fame really are. They just fade away. And what about wealth? This is the preacher's knockout punch against chasing riches. It's a hunger that can never, ever be filled. If your main goal in life is money, he says, you will simply never have enough to feel truly satisfied. It's a dead end. See, for the preacher, wealth comes with some serious hidden costs. There's the constant worry about protecting it, the kind of anxiety that keeps you up at night. Then there's that deep frustration of knowing you can't take a single penny with you when you die. And maybe the worst part? The danger that your stuff starts to own you, that money becomes your master. So if success is just an empty promise, where are we supposed to find real wisdom? Well, the preacher's answer is not what you'd expect. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. He says we should look for it in the places we usually try our best to avoid. I mean, just look at this contrast. Common sense tells us to go have fun, go to parties, seek pleasure. The preacher says, nope, do the exact opposite. He says it's better to go to a house of mourning, to a funeral. Why on earth would he say something so strange? Here's the logic behind it. A party? That's just a distraction. But a funeral? A funeral forces you to face the reality of life and death. Seeing the end of someone else's life makes you stop and take a hard look at your own. It puts everything into perspective and makes you ask that crucial question. Am I actually living a life of meaning? The heart of the wise, he says, is in the house of mourning. And you see this pattern again and again with the preacher. He's always flipping our common values upside down. He argues a good reputation is worth more than expensive perfume, that the day you die, which tells the whole story of your life, is actually more important than the day you were born, and that a serious face that's wrestling with real problems is better than shallow laughter. And all of this brings us to the final part of our journey. After taking apart our search for meaning in success and pleasure, the preacher finally gives his diagnosis for why the world is so broken and what he believes is the only real solution.
This right here is the preacher's core diagnosis of the human condition. The problem, he says, isn't with the original design. He says people were made good, upright. All the brokenness we see around us, that's the result of our own choices, our own schemes and actions that have messed up that original goodness.
So according to this interpretation, the path looks something like this. Humanity started out as a masterpiece, but through our own choices, that masterpiece got ruined. So how do you fix a ruined masterpiece? Well, the answer proposed here isn't trying harder on our own, but through reconciliation with the one who made us in the first place, with God. And at the end of the day, this is the ultimate takeaway. All those other things we chase, wealth, success, even just worldly wisdom, they're all happening under the sun. That's his phrase for a world that's cut off from God. And his argument is that since we are spiritual beings, we can only find real, lasting peace and joy through spiritual satisfaction, in that connection with God. So, after walking through all this ancient wisdom, the question kind of turns back to us, doesn't it? The preacher found his answer outside of the material world, and it really makes you think, in our own lives, with all the things we're chasing, where do we find that deep, true, and lasting satisfaction? What does that even look like for you?